and this technology specifically is facing in the domain. And it also briefly discuss about the policy issues that various organizations and government institutes are trying to rectify. Apart from that, it had, I think, a couple of questions that you need to answer in MCQ format to get your certificate. But I won't say that the course is highly complicated as such. If you have the basic knowledge of cryptocurrency and blockchain as such, and you have interest in that specific domain, or you want to learn more about this specific domain, then it should be an easy course to do. But the idea of doing these courses is basically to build certain basic knowledge and then try to advance towards something a bit more complicated. So that's briefly what this course entails. And I think that is there in almost all of the courses that are there around on internet, because from my research, what I've been looking into these online courses and specifically in this domain for past 2 years, I have figured out that 80% of these online courses are kind of same. There is slight difference in their content here and there. And sometimes, even though the content is not a lot different, but the prices are highly different in terms of the fees that these courses are charging. There are very few, or I would say very rare opportunities where you find certain courses that add more value compared to other courses. But when you go out, you will find that 80% of the courses give you the same material in just a different format. So it's very important that when you sign up for any kind of course or training, you do your own research, because not many courses are developed in this specific domain for law students and lawyers yet.
Okay, thank you for that. So moving on to the next and more technical question of the evening. Tell us about blockchain. What is it? What are some common uses and applications, and how exactly does blockchain work?
So this, okay, in order to answer this question, one thing that if most of our audience are students, they need to understand is blockchain in itself as a concept, it's not very complicated. It's just the implementation part of it that gets complicated, and that is something that most of the law students or the lawyers don't need to know about it, because that's the job of a coder, that's the job of a programmer or architect who's working in the blockchain sphere from the technical side. As a concept, blockchain is very easy to understand, and I'll give you a couple of examples to basically help you understand what exactly the blockchain is. These are highly simplistic examples, but you will still be able to understand the concept as such. So there is this, I would say, there's this organization, Mind Over Machines, and the director of this specific company, Mr. Tim Kulp, explains blockchain with an example of a school lunchbox. And I will just repeat that example once to help you understand what exactly the blockchain is for a non-technical audience that we have at the moment. So say suppose you are in a school and there are a couple of kids who want to have lunch during the lunch period, and there are around 10 students who are sitting for the lunch. 2 of the students just want to exchange their lunch boxes because one of the students is more inclined towards having cookies for the lunch, and say that student asks another student A, that if you have cookies in your lunchbox, I will just exchange it with you. The student A says, yes, I do have cookies in my lunchbox. Let's exchange it. At that very same moment, the principal of the school or the headmaster of the school just walks in and says, what is going on? All the remaining 8 students stand up and say that, they are trying to exchange their lunchbox because student B likes cookies and student A is saying that he has cookies in his lunchbox. The principal says, okay, exchange it. I'm just overseeing it. I hope everyone, whatever you're speaking is true. They exchange it and they find out that there was actually cookies inside the lunchbox and the transaction is completed. Now in this whole setup, student A and B is kind of participants. So in blockchain, you usually have participants, those people who are actually directly involved into the transaction. So student A and B is basically participants in the blockchain sphere. The lunchbox that has cookies in it is an asset that has been a part of the transaction that is being transacted into. So in blockchain, you have parties and you have an asset that is being transferred. It could be cryptocurrency, it could be data, depending upon what kind of blockchain it is. And then the condition of exchange was that if you have cookies, then I will take the lunchbox. So there is if and then logic applied into, which is smart contract. Smart contract is basically a codified contract. If this happens, then this will take place. So in blockchain, you have a smart contract that basically helps you to complete the transaction. And all of this transaction that was happening between the students was kind of supervised by the headmaster or the principal. So there was a consistent model where their approval was required by someone who is more trustworthy within the school. And in the blockchain also, you have approval that is given for any kind of transaction through the consistent model, which basically means that there's a group of parties or the group of stakeholders within the blockchain who finally approve that transaction. So there is no fraud or misinformation that is given in those kind of transactions. So that is basically what a blockchain is in a very overly simplistic way from a non-technical perspective. But if I have to give a brief definition to summarize this entire explanation of what exactly the blockchain is, then basically it is a process in which various agents or various participants engage into a transaction for a specific kind of asset. When it comes to cryptocurrency blockchain, you are basically, your asset is a cryptocurrency. If you are into a blockchain that is basically for data management or document management, then the exchange that is happening is related to a specific document. So that document is your asset. And in order to validate that transaction, you have a consistent model where different partners within the blockchain approve that transaction. Let's compare it with a more traditional way of transactions. So some of you might have transferred money internationally to your friends or family members, or you might have heard of international transactions while working with your law firm or the company. It usually takes around 4 to 5 days to finalize the transactions from the time when you send the transaction till finally it reaches to another company's bank account or something, or someone's personal account. Sometimes take time, especially if it's a lot of money and you're doing directly through the bank. It takes so much time because it passes through multiple banks. It's just not your bank which directly sends money to the bank of the receiver. Sometimes there are multiple parties, exchanges, and banks that are involved into it. Now here you have an intermediary, which is basically a middleman, multiple banks that are working in between to finalize the transaction that is happening between the two parties. Now, the problem with this kind of setup usually is that each bank will have their own transaction cost. So if you are transferring, say, 100 USD from India, the other side will probably not receive 100 USD. They will receive slightly less than that. Also, it takes time. It takes a lot of time to make a certain emergency transaction. And the third problem that you see is that you're relying on a third party, right? Although you and your family want to directly have a transaction, but you have to rely heavily on the third party. And sometimes they charge a lot of money. Sometimes they might hold on to your funds because of whatever reasons and all those kinds of, and there is a lack of efficiency in transfer because you actually don't know how your money is getting transferred. All that you know is it's deducted from your account and it will someday be credited into your family's or friend's account. What blockchain basically does is remove these kind of problems from traditional transactions. So you will be having a direct transaction between the party that wants to send money, that wants to send data, that wants to send documents to the party that wants to receive. So it's more peer-to-peer transaction without having anyone in between to control that transaction specifically. Problems that you sometimes also face is banks usually decide their own exchange rate. And those are the circumstances where you might end up losing money if you are transferring from one currency to another currency in a different jurisdiction. But if you're using blockchain, or if you're using cryptocurrency, that's not a problem. You will exactly receive the same value in a couple of minutes. So this is like a very non-technical understanding of blockchain, but if you really want to go into in depth, that you need to understand a lot of technical concepts as such. For first, like what is node, what is hash, what is identity, what is Merkle tree. So we'll not go into those details. Otherwise, I don't think we will be able to finish it within the time. But in a very simplistic manner, this is what the blockchain is. And what I will do after this session is I will share a couple of links that help students or the participants who are engaged with us in this webinar to understand what exactly I'm speaking about. And then they can go back and do slightly more research on different concepts. And I think you also discussed, I'm sorry, I forgot, you also discussed about the use case scenarios in blockchain. Now, you name a field, there is something or some other company or some organization that is working on implementing blockchain into that specific component. And since most of the students or most of the participants who have joined us are probably law students, they must be aware of a dispute resolution. They must be aware of arbitration, litigation, negotiation, mediation, right? So there is this one startup, I won't say startup, it's a full-fledged company now, known as Kleros. And they provide decentralized arbitration for various kind of technical and e-commerce related disputes. What they basically do is they use the power of blockchain and AI and the benefits that blockchain offers and conduct the arbitration in a very decentralized way. When I say very decentralized way, that means that no arbitrator would know what exactly the other arbitrator is doing, who is the co-arbitrator, and a lot of different parameters that have been used in decentralized arbitration. There are organizations that are working in education domain where you can do online courses. There is this platform ODEM, ODEM, which basically provides courses on various kind of technology. But what is interesting is that you can store your credentials, you can store your certificate in a blockchain for a longer period of time, and you will never lose it. It's secure over there, and you can share it depending upon your own requirements. Then if you are following the recent legislative changes that are happening in India related to data security and data protection, then you will know how important it is to have data security and data protection in medical sphere, because you have a lot of, I would say, medical information regarding your past medical status and a lot of different details that you want to secure, and you want to share very limited information to say your next doctor or hospital. So there are startups that are working in that specific domain to give you back the control of your medical information and your records and secure them in a very secure way and give you full control of it. Then if you or your family members have ever taken loan, you know that most of the times bank check your credit scoring, right? So there are startups that are working into providing financial passport, which basically means that they will assist you in terms of recording your financial scores, your credit scores in a blockchain platform. How it helps is that a lot of jurisdictions, they have their own standard of setting credit score. So it kind of makes it uniform. Second, if you applied to a specific bank for, say, loan, and then they did the credit score check, they had all the documents related to your past loan, credit card, and everything, and then you choose to not take the loan, they will still have that information. You can't take it back that easily. But blockchain gives you that kind of control where you can share only this specific component of the information for a specific period of time. So there are platforms that are working on that. As a law students and lawyers, we are also aware about how important the notary or notarization of the documents is. And there are a lot of e-notary or blockchain-based notary platforms that are working, which basically timestamp the documents to not only say that this document is original, but also say that this document was present in this specific device on this specific date and second, and you can't change those files, you can't change those kind of records. And I will be sharing a couple of links of these kind of startups at the end of our discussion. So you'll see that you name any kind of domain, whether it's asset management, whether it's capital markets, whether it's tax specific industry, whether it's real estate, whether it's governance. Even in the governance also, a lot of governments are implementing blockchain-based technology here in Dubai. Almost all real estate contracts are based on the blockchain, and Dubai has this plan of Smart Dubai, which basically means they want to bring their entire governance, bring their entire government on blockchain, and take the full-fledged assistance of blockchain and AI. So kind of it's a very far-fetched plan, but someday a government will be run on blockchain. So you name anything, whether it's even for the voting, you know about the US elections and what has happened in the past and all those kind of things that we have read in the news. There are a lot of discussions that are going on to conduct voting based on blockchain platform to ensure that the privacy of the voters is secure. At the same time, there are additional security mechanisms that are in place for blockchain related, for the voting related issues that usually in the democracy that we face, because voting is a very essential component of the democracy. Fundraising, digital identity, real estate, you name a specific domain, there are some organizations with people who are already working and developing. So those are the kind of domains which are inherently not directly related to the law students, but there are domains like intellectual property. In that specific domain, you have blockchain-based companies that are assisting to make sure that whatever you create has a timestamp, and tomorrow when you go in front of the court for, say, fighting a case related to copyright, there is a document that has a timestamp based upon the blockchain. So no one can say that they created that document before you, because it's been recorded in blockchain, and the courts would know that no one can modify blockchain because that's how their inherent properties are. So that's the place where a lot of people are using from the legal community this specific technology. Then you have smart contracts that are getting more popular into. Obviously, smart contracts at the moment have certain challenges, but that is again a domain where a lot of people are working into it. So these are broadly different spheres in which this technology is being utilized from various sides.
Okay, that was very useful, Sandeep. Thank you for simplifying the entire blockchain technology for us. I think the lunchbox and biscuits is a great way to understand it. So just to recap of some of the benefits of blockchain in general, it's a peer-to-peer network, and you don't really need a central authority because everyone else is going to approve those transactions and validate them. So that's a huge benefit. And I think it can also somewhat be seen as a threat to a lot of governments, because governments like to get involved and stick their nose in everything and tell you what to do. And blockchain and cryptocurrency really doesn't let them do that. But then again, it can probably be a benefit to those governments and those organizations who do decide to adopt blockchain into their corporate strategies or governance strategies. So, okay, that was very helpful. And we had a lot of questions regarding some of the very interesting companies who you said are utilizing this, and we'll try and address those towards the end of the session. If you're ready, we'll move on to part 2 of our webinar today on the stakeholders' reaction. Is it hot or is it cold? So the next question is, do you think companies are actively working towards implementing blockchain and other tech in their corporate functioning?
Well, a brief answer is yes, but the companies are not going all out to implement the blockchain. They are not going mad about it. If there is a use case, if there is a requirement for certain kind of changes to be made to incorporate blockchain, then yes, they are doing it. But there are companies which cannot probably afford. So I'll just take a step back and speak about certain challenges that small companies, at least, or growing companies or startups usually face when their core function is not blockchain related, but they have to implement, or they want to implement blockchain as such in whatever business that they are doing. First one is blockchain is not that cheap when it comes to the architect and the coding side of it, because there are very few people that are doing, compared to, say, normal coding language. There are very few people who know about the technicalities of it, and which is a good sign for not only for the coders but even for the law students. And we'll come to it how it's a good sign that very few people are involved into this specific domain. So I was working with this company which wanted to implement a specific small project and bring it on the blockchain. And one of the hurdle for it, and it was a decently funded company, but one of the challenge for it was the funding. Specifically for that project, the price tag was going way high than their initial budget, and therefore it didn't make much sense for them, because then it became more kind of a showpiece to implement something on blockchain and say that, hey, we are blockchain enabled company and we are using blockchain for this specific platform, rather than the use case scenario. So it gets sometimes costly. Second, when startups are already trying to do something new, which they have not clearly figured out, and what kind of challenges that they can face, bringing that kind of platform and bringing that kind of, say, business model on blockchain creates further problems, because one of the characteristics of blockchain is that it's immutable. You can't change it. Something that has been run into it, some transactions that have taken place, you can't amend it. You can't just go into the accounts book and make edits and then again do control S. Once it's done, it stays there. And therefore, if you've made a mistake as a startup or as a growing company, and you have brought everything on blockchain and there's something goes wrong, then you have to start fresh. You can't go back and make changes into this technology to rectify those kind of mistakes. So that's again a second challenge that people are facing. And the third is obviously, as you spoke about it briefly, is the governance. I'm not saying that the blockchain is not regulated as such. If there is no specific law for it, obviously there are other laws which are not specifically designed for the blockchain but still apply. Just in the case of, say, smart contracts, we don't have any Indian Smart Contract Act 2020, but if you have to look at the smart contracts, you have to go back to an Indian Contract Act and you try to take interpretation from there, and you go back to IT Act and you take the interpretation from there. And that's how you try to make sense of the emerging technology, because there's always a lag between the technology and the law. We do have a lot of companies that implement facial recognition for employee attendance and entrance and exit, but still there are parts and there are kind of elections in India where the voting is done by thumbprint. You have to put your thumb in the ink and you have to put it on the paper to do certain local level votings. So that the law is usually behind from the technology. And the point that I'm trying to make here is that there are a lot of companies which probably might implement it, but there is uncertainty when it comes to blockchain, because in a lot of startups, sometimes when we speak about blockchain, we have to sometimes also bring in crypto assets. And when we speak about crypto assets, it's kind of a hot topic, whether it's an asset, whether it's a commodity, whether it's currency, whether it's security, how to categorize it, how to tax it. And a lot of governments are not into favor of it when it comes to implementation of these kind of platforms. So those are the third challenge that companies usually face in that specific kind of domain. But there are a lot of companies that are implementing, even there are a lot of law firms, big law firms and international law firms that are implementing blockchain for sharing the evidence, for recording their files. Because if you go online, you will see that a lot of law firms are also the target of hacking, because they have a lot of client sensitive data and can be used for asking ransom and asking a lot of money. So they are also bringing these kind of additional technological tools to make themselves secure. So as I spoke about various domains that have already started working into it, and whether you name real estate or supply chain management or e-commerce or any kind of domain, there are one or two at least startups that are already working into that specific kind of domain. Few of them are highly successful. And there are a few startups that started back in 2015 and 16, and they're still running, have received, I think, a lot of funding, and they're doing damn good in collaboration with various governments. But at the same time, we have to also look at from the perspective of the challenges that are already there, and slowly, once those challenges are kind of tackled, probably more companies will start implementing. The fourth challenge that I can briefly speak about is also the lack of knowledge at the moment. in not everyone know about, and it's not a technology that everyone can also understand. Concept wise, yes, I can understand, but when I have to go into the technical, it gets difficult for me also to understand the concept as such, and therefore the implementation has to be made a little bit more simple. So there are a couple of startups that have specifically working in the domain to just simplify the implementation of blockchain in different kinds of business setups. So they are kind of somewhere in middleman, which use the blockchain technology in its raw form, simplify it, and then give it to the business to provide a business solution.
Okay, thank you, Sandeep. That was very well put, and thank you for sort of pointing out the challenges that companies are facing. And you're right. I think the fourth challenge that you did mention is one of the, I feel, is a very huge issue, that there's not much knowledge and understanding of the area of what blockchain is. Because today people understand, they hear the term smart contracts, they just think, okay, the contract is really smart. They don't really think it has something to do with maybe coding or a deeper application of technology. And artificial intelligence seems to be the drawing niche area which people actually know about, they've heard about it, they've seen it a lot in movies. But the real game changer, some of us feel, is blockchain, because it's something that's implementable, it's doable, and people are doing it and doing it successfully. So let's move on to the next question then. In your own words, how do you see blockchain overlapping with law?
Well, there are different ways to basically answer it. First is obviously the regulatory challenges that we are facing, but also about different opportunities that blockchain provides to law students and lawyers who want to get into this specific domain. As I said, law has always lagged behind when it comes to catching up with the technology that we have seen even in the internet stage, when we started having these e-commerce or sharing economy platform like Uber, Ola, and various other platforms. We saw that there were a lot of protests that were going on in India, that there were a lot of challenges as to how to tax these gig economies, what kind of employment legislations will be applicable, not only in India, in other jurisdictions, in other developed jurisdictions also. There were a lot of discussions that were happening, how law lags behind when it comes to this kind of new and innovative, and that is going to happen always. It's not something that we can stop, because technology usually moves faster than law. But law definitely overlaps in a lot of ways on these emerging technologies, whether it's blockchain or AI or ledger technology or any kind of other new technology that we are experiencing. First is how the job of a lawyer and law firms that has transformed from being a traditional book readers to something where they have to also think about these technology, and not only think and advise their clients, but also implement these technologies in their in-house departments or in their law firm. Because as I discussed earlier, the evidence management, data security, sharing of the files, and keeping the proper record of the evidences and stuff is something that big law firms are considering and putting heavy money in terms of incorporating those changes. So that's one thing. And the second is for law students and the lawyers who want to engage into it. There's a lot of scope towards growing their niche practice area and gaining more knowledge into it. Because in the beginning, I spoke about how blockchain is overlapping with, say, medical sphere, how blockchain is, say, overlapping with asset management, capital markets. But whenever we discuss about the overlap of, say, blockchain and use of blockchain, say, in healthcare, you cannot ignore the role of lawyers, because the data security comes in and someone has to audit those kind of new technological solutions that are provided for these specific domains. And someone has to do the compliance check for these domains. Someone has to provide consultancy and policy advice when these kind of new technologies are implemented in existing sectors. And that's where the role of lawyers come in. The advantage of now getting into this kind of or any technology at the moment is that there are very few people who are actually looking into it, and there is a scope of continuous growth in this specific sector for quite a long period of time, because still things are at its early stage, and slowly as the sector grows, as the technology also improves, because there are a lot of things that needs to be fixed within this technology itself. I think the scope of work and the requirement for blockchain or lawyers who understand this kind of technology will also grow significantly. So when you say overlap between blockchain and law, I see it from two different perspectives. One is what are the day-to-day working where the law and the blockchain is overlapping, which is obviously different space that we have spoken about, like smart contracts. Usually the contract used to be the part of lawyer's domain, and to a certain extent of sales team, where they negotiate the initial basic commercial terms and then give it to the legal team for the further drafting and stuff. But now even the coders will be involved. So that is again one place where smart contracts are something that we can consider as a overlap between law and blockchain. And then I spoke about Kleros, which is a decentralized arbitration platform, which is again a kind of overlap between blockchain and law, because it's a dispute resolution, and we know the dispute resolution is something that's regulated, and almost all jurisdictions have pretty stringent laws as to how a dispute has to be resolved. Then you have various other platforms which are related to, say, intellectual property and e-notary that we spoke about. That's again how the blockchain is overlapping with the law, because tomorrow or in the near future, you will see that the arguments will be made how this copyright, the rightful owner of the copyright is Mr. X, because you see the blockchain and there are records that you can't change, you can't modify, you can't create a fraud, or you can't edit it, and therefore those kind of evidences will be presented in front of the court. And the second component that I see of overlap between blockchain and law is the place where lawyers can find out opportunities to work in that specific domain. Law students can start exploring this specific domain and see what kind of different opportunities that they can get in this overlap between the blockchain and law. To just summarize from the second component, I would say that there are opportunities out there for legal consultancy in this specific domain, and there are few law firms that are specifically working into those specific sector, and those are the places where probably law students or the lawyers could look into exploring more opportunities. Then there are a lot of organizations that are specifically working on policy aspects of it. So they draft the policy, they do the research. So there are a lot of policy houses that are specifically working on blockchain, AI, and smart contract domain, and how it's impacting the various policy angles, and then how the legislation gets affected by it. Then you also have the compliance issues. Whenever you have to implement blockchain, you have to make sure that the data, the technology, the contract, the legal requirement, the financial requirement, all those compliance checks are in place. You can't just incorporate something and add into a specific sector just to increase its value without regarding the importance of the law. So again, the legal compliance is something that's where students or the lawyers would be able to provide great assistance. Then the legal research, again, something that you don't need to know highly technical stuff of it, but if you understand the concept as such and you're good with the law and the legal research, then obviously there are ample opportunities for you to get into this specific domain from the legal research perspective as well.
Okay, thank you so much. That was very insightful, and seeing as how there are certain corporate firms in India, at least, moving towards adopting a more technical approach and trying to develop a practice area which acknowledges that technology is being used by their clients, and therefore they need to get lawyers who know about blockchain or know about AI. It's a very important move that they need to make. So that concludes the second half of the webinar. Let's move on to understanding whether blockchain or technological areas in law Are they a niche practice area or a major specialization? So the next question in that part would be, what are some challenges that you see in the upcoming years in implementing blockchain, either globally or nation specific?
Well, I think in addition to the initial, I think 3 or 4 challenges that we discussed about implementing blockchain as such, which is obviously the knowledge gap issue, um, the cost issue, and also the requirement issue. Few of the businesses don't actually need it, but they still want to, because it's kind of a fashion symbol that's becoming into the industry, and people speak about it more and more. Um, and they get used to it. And the fourth one is obviously the legal challenges that people are facing in terms of the lack of regulations, or I would say confusing regulations that are in place at the moment when it comes to these kind, because the policymakers and the people who are making the law also need to understand the importance of the technology, and they also need to understand what kind of impact these kind of technology might have 10 years down the line, because you can't keep on changing the law on monthly basis. So you have to draft the law, you have to draft the policy, but having a very far-sighted view of these kind of technology platforms. So it takes time. It's nothing to blame them, but it just takes time. And therefore, those are the kind of challenges that are there. The another challenge that I also see is specifically speaking from the law students' perspective, is there are not enough opportunities within the law school also for students to learn more about these kind of emerging technologies. So if you want to work with a startup, or if you want to work with a company, there should be some initial introduction that should be given to the students in these kind of platform, because from our discussion, or even if you go out, do your own research, you figure out that this is something that's definitely is a requirement for the lawyers that are coming in this generation, or the lawyers who are going to graduate in next 3-4 years. They will definitely face this kind of technology if they are working into an multinational company, or they are working into a big law firm that deals with international clients. And therefore the law school curriculum needs to also start incorporating these kind of challenges, and start making modules that are more globally adaptable when it comes to these kind of requirements. 5 challenges that I can see from my perspective when it comes to implementation of blockchain as such in the specific domain.
Okay, thank you. So just to continue on sort of like the advice you were giving to law students, and that there should be some sort of introductory courses offered in law schools today. Speaking from experience, it really helped me, because I did take up myself, an elective on governance of AI and blockchain, and that really helped me and pushed me to where I am today. And this is the reason why we're having this discussion today, probably. But let's, discuss a little bit more about the sort of advice you would want to give to law students considering taking up courses on AI and blockchain, be it within their university or maybe, on a platform like Coursera or edX. What is some additional advice you would like to give to them?
Well, it's very important for students to make sure that they understand there are 2 extremes of any discussion that is taking place on blockchain or smart contracts. There is one extreme where there are people who just don't want to touch this specific domain. They think that it's highly complicated. It's already, I spent so much of time in law school, I don't think I will be able to cover the basic requirements to understand this specific technology. I might as well focus on tax and other subjects that are required. But what they need to understand is that from concept perspective, it's not difficult. It's very easy. It gets difficult. I'm just repeating myself, but it gets difficult from a technical side of it. And technical side is always complicated. So if you ask a program developer or a coder to give you 4 principles of statutory interpretation, it will not be easy for them. It will be highly complicated for them as well. And that's not something that is expected from them. So you can't expect a fish to basically climb a tree And that's what I'm trying to explain here, that, don't be afraid of these fancy words and people using more complicated things and stuff. As a law student, as a lawyer, to start with, all that you need to understand is the concept. Once you are good with the concept, and that goes for any law subject, if your concepts are strong, then you can slowly develop more technical parts of that specific subject. So if you know the core principles that make a contract valid, then you can go into more fancy things that are required in under the international contract law or contract mechanism, or complicated contracts or chain of contracts and stuff. But if you know what is offer acceptance consideration, all that kind of stuff, then you will slowly grow into it. But if your basic concepts are not clear, then it gets difficult for you also to understand the technical bits of it. So my advice to the students would be that stick to the bare concepts of these technology. You don't need to go hyper technical. No one expects a lawyer, when they are hired as a blockchain lawyer or someone to advise to develop a blockchain architect. They are hired to just advise on the compliance side of it. So that's the first thing. So start from somewhere, and that is very important. The second part is always stay hungry. I don't know what your law school says. I don't know what your mentors in your internship and that place, how they guide you. But online courses is an online material that you see online is highly valuable in terms of gaining more knowledge and being able to put some sort of credibility on your CV. So make sure that you start exploring these kind of online courses. I have been doing online courses since 2013. That was my first semester at law school, and I'm still enrolled in an online course. So that's like at least 7 years I've been doing online courses. So I've done a lot. A few are not that great, a few are good. But one thing that you have to keep in your mind is that if you're doing these online courses just to add another bullet point in your CV, then it's not going to work out, because the people on the other side who are going to recruit you, interview you, they are smart, and you can't just do 10 different courses and get the certificate, because few courses getting a certificate is really easy because the questions are easy. You can find out answers while giving an exam and all that kind of stuff. So don't go behind these courses just to get a certificate. Try to take it easy and do these courses to gain the knowledge and be able to justify that you are applying for one specific opportunity and you are genuinely interested into it, because, hey, look at my CV, these are the courses that I have done, and let's have a conversation based upon these courses, based upon the knowledge, based upon the articles that I have written or something. So try to make that conversation more meaningful rather than just pointing them to another bullet point that you have added by doing an online course. So that's very important that you do these courses, but at the same time, you should be very clear why you are doing these kind of courses if you really want to get into this domain. And I will strongly recommend you to do the courses, because it will take time for your law school to start incorporating modules and start getting the right people to teach you. So it's better that you take help of these online platforms to make yourself a bit more educated about this domain, but at the same time also have a very close look at the syllabus and the fees, because some of the courses are damn expensive and those courses are not worth the money, because you can find the same material online at a cheaper rate, or same kind of curriculum that you can find in another course which is less expensive. It's just that people have put in certain brand names, making it a bit more expensive than. So make sure that you keep a check on your finance. The best place to look for the courses at a cheaper rate would be Coursera. But there are other platforms, and I can prepare an email to help you with that and provide you certain links as to places where you can find these kind of platforms. The third advice that I would give you is read on daily basis. There's a lot that is happening. Your parliament can't catch up with the technological advancement that I'm making. So how would you? The only way you can still be in touch is continuously read on daily basis. Make your habit. If you are interested into one specific domain, then make sure that you read at least 2 articles, one in the evening and another one in the morning, or whichever way you schedule, but at least read 2 articles, one national level and one at an international level, what is happening, or break it down to something as one specifically related to the law and one specifically related to more technical side of it. And once you start doing it for a month or month and a half, you will see huge difference in your thinking capability and your views about this specific. It's hard work. It's not very sexy thing to do, to read articles on daily basis. It's a bit boring, but believe me, trust me, if you start doing it, your knowledge about the specific domain will grow, and it will help you immensely in doing further research or gaining more opportunities and stuff. Another advice that I can give you is start working with startups, not specifically startups that are, say, doing blockchain related stuff, but a startup that's into tech sphere, because it's just that your orientation towards approaching these technology has to change. So try to find out those startups that are working into tech domain, or the law firms that have niche area or practice area specifically into the technology, and start working with them. It doesn't need to be a blockchain based work. It doesn't need to be a cryptocurrency related or crypto asset related work. It can be anything, but it has to be tech related, so that your understanding of the technology as such also increases. And then it will be very easy for you to migrate from non-blockchain based tech side of it to a blockchain based tech side of it. If you're still in your law school, I would strongly advise you to do an internship with the startup, because every day a startup is breaking something and fixing something else. And it gives you a very great platform to make mistakes and also learn from the mistakes. And there will be people around you who are really enthusiastic about it. And then also look for the law firms that are working into this specific tech space, not specifically blockchain, but it could be any kind of technology. It could be related to, say, data protection stuff. It could be related to IT. It could be related to complicated transfer of technology and stuff. So you can still start working on those kind of things that will again help you in terms of gaining your knowledge. So these 3-4 things, if you slowly start working on these things, I think it will immensely help you. But at the same time, the fifth advice that I can give you is, if you want to be a tech lawyer, you just don't need to focus only on IT Act. You need to know tax. You need to know dispute resolution. You need to know the contract law. So don't ignore these substantive laws or the procedure laws, because somewhere these laws also help you in developing the broad understanding of the niche domain that you are working. Because I've seen a lot of times when students get interested into arbitration, all that they care about is going through the Arbitration Act. But I think that's the wrong approach. You should have understanding of the contract law. You should have understanding of other legislations that kind of supplements your area of interest. So broadly, I would say these are the things that if you can start doing, probably it will help you in some or other way to break into this specific domain.
Okay, thank you, Sandeep. That was very insightful, and you did address a lot of the important touch points that I think law students today should pay attention to. And for our viewers out there, Sandeep is someone who is very invested in the arbitration practice, but he doesn't just limit himself to that. And he really stretches and tries to cover whatever topic interests him. So it's helped him out. He's head of legal affairs at a firm in Dubai right now. So obviously he's doing something right. So taking his advice is no small matter. Just a last follow-up question on, advice to law students. Being someone who is the head of legal affairs and, you've been practicing for a couple of years now, what do you think lawyers, or companies or law firms look for in lawyers today, be them students or be them already working in the legal industry? What do you think makes someone attractive as a hire in the legal industry?
So I would say it widely depends upon what kind of firm or what kind of company that you are looking to work at. But while working here in UAE, and I have also applied, I didn't get it through contacts or something. I have applied for jobs here in UAE. I've used almost all their job portals, applied on daily basis, have attended almost all kind of conferences to get my CV across. From that basic understanding, that I have gained, at least in this fair. And why I'm speaking specifically of UAE, because you see, 90% of the population are foreigners in this specific country, and most of the companies usually engage into more international oriented work. So it gives you a brief overview of as to what is usually expected from a lawyer in today's time, and especially in this kind of dynamics. So the first thing that I would say is a continuous hunger to learn more. I have seen employers really appreciating a young lawyer who still has that kind of vibe and still has that kind of enthusiasm to continuously learn and invest in themselves in terms of the courses and the training that they are doing. So if somehow you can say that you were not just a, a law student who was there in the law school and just graduated, but you can see that you have put in additional hard work, and when faced with the challenges, you have always equipped yourself with more knowledge and more expertise, then that's something that recruiters will obviously appreciate it. Because once you start working in a company, in a law firm, it's not something that you can take something from your law school and directly apply it. It's not going to be that kind of dynamics. You have to continuously learn. Your actual, I would say, law school starts when you graduate from law school, because that's when you start facing unique challenges and you have to find out a solution. And to find out that solution, you have to educate yourself, you have to research and stuff. So the mistake that most of the time law students usually make is on graduation, if they get a job, they slow it down. So initially they are doing research paper presentation, they are doing moods, and they are doing research articles and debates and negotiation, mediation and whatnot. But once they graduate and they get their first job, they kind of get lazy sometime. I'm not sure whether that's the right word to use, but it happens. So make sure that you still have that kind of fire, and you are able to show that kind of fire when you are applying for your first job or when you're switching from your first job to another job. And then another thing that you have to keep in mind is that if you're applying for an in-house role specifically, or if you're planning to work with a startup, it's very important that you not only understand the business, but you are really good with the technology, because most of the companies, big or small, they want to implement more and more technological solutions, because that basically helps them to be more productive and scalable. Therefore, you should be very comfortable with the technology. That's something that you can't do away with it. Like, it's as simple as, say, suppose you are interested into litigation, but you don't want to speak up, you are not good at advocacy, or you hate advocacy, then you can't be actually a good lawyer. You can't be a good lawyer in the litigation domain. The same goes when you want to work in a startup or in an in-house role or in a firm that is more oriented towards the technology practice. You have to be comfortable with the technology. You have to keep yourself updated with the changes in the technology, not specifically from the advisory perspective, but also for your own use, how you can make yourself efficient by using these kind of technological platform. The third thing that I would advise you is additional knowledge of language helps a lot. If you know French, if you know German, if you have the opportunity to learn or at least start from somewhere, it just helps you to get into one specific jurisdiction more easily compared to someone else. So that's, again, language is a powerful tool. And if you know Arabic or any language, if you're in your first year or second year of law school and you are hearing this, please make sure that if you can figure out, if you really want to work in an international environment, if you want to go out and find out, I don't know any other language apart from Hindi, Rajasthani, and English. So I'm not saying it based on my experience of knowing the knowledge, but my experience of not knowing the knowledge, knowing the language. So make sure that that is additional thing that you can look into. Dual qualification, whether in US or UK, that is again being valued because the work is getting more international in nature, and having understanding of other countries' laws and legislations and having the qualification in another country as well immensely helps you, makes you more marketable. And the last piece of advice that has always been very close to me also would be to continuously research and publish quality material and publish articles, because that is something which is an easy way of marketing yourself, easy way letting companies and recruiters know that how your mind functions, how you articulate, and how well you are with the analysis of the specific law and put it into a more business sensible language. So that's again a very important thing to do, because once you graduate, you can't do moods, you can't do debate competition. it will be difficult to find an opportunity to paper presentation, negotiation competition, but research is still something that you can do. It's most of the stuff that you will be doing. So make sure that you start developing your skills with respect to the research and paper publications. I think that would be it. If implemented, probably it will somehow help you.
Yeah, that was very interesting to know about, and research, definitely reading is very important. So we'll just move on to the questions from the audience now. We have a couple of them waiting for you. So I think someone was curious about, were there any prerequisites to the course that you did to get certified as a blockchain and law professional, or how did you go about that process?
So this is, for me, this is not my first course on blockchain, fintech sphere as such. So I didn't specifically see whether there was any kind of prerequisite or not. Um, Most probably there wasn't any kind of requirement before doing this specific course. But I think the question in itself is wrong, unless and until you are just so focused on that one specific course that I have done, and you just want to do that course, then it's a different thing. Otherwise, your approach, or anyone who has asked this question, your approach should be more about how to gain more knowledge or get more experience in this specific domain. So you start exploring more courses. If you do one day research, I'm damn sure you will figure out a course that is way better than this one that you should start with. So usually in these kind of courses and these kind of websites and platforms, they're usually not prerequisite. Not only in this course, 90% of the courses, there will be no prior requirement, because there are very few people who are providing these courses, and there are a lot of people who want to do it. And a lot of these institutes just wants to make money. Right. And this is the time, pandemic and stuff, a lot of people want to do the courses, and they have opened a lot of courses and stuff. So most of the time for these kind of online courses, there will hardly be any kind of prerequisite as such. Right. So you can just go there and do the courses and stuff. So for my course, I think 99% chances are that there was no prerequisite, and all the courses that I have done are usually there is no prerequisite, no prior requirement, and that's there in 90% of the courses that are available online.
Okay, great. So actually, we do have an interesting and rather general follow-up question to that. Where can we learn blockchain technology? So why don't you take a crack at this first, and even I'll maybe, give my 2 cents on it.
Sure, no problem. How I started, I can just briefly give you how I started learning about this specific domain. For around 2 or 3 years, I didn't spend any money on courses or something. I just read more stuff, because the internet is full of material. There are books that you can download in PDF format. There are a lot of articles that are written. There are a lot of podcasts that are happening around that you can keep on listening to. So suppose if you are commuting from your home to your law school, you just plug in your earphones and just hear those podcasts. They are really interesting podcasts that are happening. So your focus should be to, if you want to start with this domain, your focus should be more about reading and hearing, rather than just directly jumping on a paid course, because that doesn't make sense. Even if the course is really cheap, still, if you're starting new, you don't need to take those kind of courses. You don't need the certificates. That can come at a later stage. These courses will always be there. So there is no point of putting money into something to learn very basic. And these courses are usually very short. All these courses are usually very short. They don't go into in-depth from the legal perspective. So you will end up wasting your money if you're starting. So read as much as you can. There are a lot of articles on SSR and for various in-depth research from the technical side. There are a lot of, so another way to understand this technology, which I kind of found at the later stage, was to read the white paper. So most of these blockchain and tech-based startups, when they go into and provide a new service or something, they usually publish a white paper, which basically means that the challenge that they are trying to resolve and how they are going to do it, what are the compliance issues, what are the technical issues that they're going to face, and a brief description of their product and services and all that kind of stuff. Like if you go on the Claros platform, they have an entire book on what they are doing, from technical, non-technical, marketing and legal side. Everything is covered in that one book, and it's available for download for free. So go there, just read those kind of white papers and books that these startups have published, because no one knows their product, no one knows their challenge better than them, because they are the people who are leading that specific kind of challenge in that domain. So that is again an interesting way to read more about it. Another thing that you can do is try to get in touch with your friends from IITs or other engineering colleges, because they will be able to sit with you and explain you from the technical side of it if you really want to venture into, and you can have one-on-one conversation. If you know someone, or if you meet someone at a fest or some sort of conference or something, just make sure that you make friends from the technical side and start reading. So that's how I started. I started with the reading bit of it, and once that was done, I started doing online courses. So I've done multiple courses. I've done physical trainings as well with PwC here in Dubai. And at the same time, I kept on reading about it. So the second stage would be to take these kind of online courses, or take the courses from your law school and start to develop more knowledge. And the third stage is then start writing about it, start writing content about it, start doing more research about it. And at the same time, also work on some small projects with the startups or something. And then slowly get into a more practical side of it after developing the theoretical aspect of it, after developing the knowledge aspect of it. So that's pretty much it from my side. Bhalothia, over to you.
Yes, and I think in addition, what really helped me was, I watched a lot of YouTube videos. YouTube videos can teach you anything from how to tie a tie to blockchain. So that was very helpful for me personally, and that was also what the efforts that my our website, the Digital Future, is trying to focus on, is trying to consolidate a lot of the information on these tech areas and make it easier for individuals who are interested in learning more to have a one-stop platform to read up more about blockchain, artificial intelligence, and so on. So we have another interesting question from our YouTube comments. What are your thoughts on the draft bill that proposes to introduce digital rupee in India and ban cryptocurrency? I know you're not in India right now, but maybe you can just share some thoughts.
As you said, I wouldn't be the right person to answer, but I slightly followed it and had a comparison of it with other countries where this kind of ban is taking place, or the places where the government wants to control. I think my view is something that I have already discussed, that it takes time for law to catch up with the technology in terms of what is happening. And the second response that I figured out, because most of this stuff is happening in more kind of developing jurisdictions and few specific kind of I would say jurisdictions where these kind of laws get implemented. So my second view is more of a political stuff, and that's not precisely for Indian as such, but for other jurisdictions also having the similar kind of dynamics in these countries. Because one thing that we have to make sure when we read these legislations is, and in other countries as well, that there are certain kind of dynamics in specific kind of jurisdictions where the government wants to have some sort of control or some sort of say over it. So that could probably be the reason why they want to have. Second is the lack of machinery. So what happens is, in India, I have seen that if we don't understand something, we just block it and then develop our knowledge, and then we come back and say, yeah, now we can do it. So we develop our knowledge in that phase of uncertainty that we create in terms of what we are doing. And the third thing is, from my understanding of what is happening in India, is the moment you block cryptocurrency or you ban cryptocurrency, you kind of also create hurdle for startups and companies that are working into blockchain sphere. Because the problem is, these two things are kind of interlinked with each other to a great extent. So when you say that the cryptocurrencies are illegal and you have certain implications because of that, there are a lot of startups that stopped working even in the blockchain sphere, because they do offer certain kind of token system when it comes to offering their services and their requirements. So that's again an additional challenge and probably a criticism of what is happening in India. And third is, if you're following the RBI, the SEBI, and I think the Ministry of Finance, all these three different institutes notifications that started coming in back in, I think, 2013 till date, you see a lot of confusion that was created, and quite a time that the government took to finally take a call on it. So my understanding is that that it's a wrong move, right? Because there are other countries that are not that sophisticated, have still been able to regulate these things in a very proper way, and there are developed jurisdictions that are able to regulate it into a proper way. But one challenge that most of the jurisdictions face is with respect to the cryptocurrency. So even if they regulate it, make it centralized, have some sort of mechanism on place, a lot of people go into the rebellion stage because the cryptocurrency was meant to be decentralized. Because we cannot ignore the fact that in darknet, people are buying arms, people are using these cryptocurrency for terrorist related activities, for illegal activities. That is happening for sure, and that is a valid concern for the government also to take an action. So you have to weigh two different cost benefit analysis, and I think Indian government decided that the cost of keeping this stuff ongoing is way more dangerous than just blocking it. So let's just block and see what we can do meanwhile, and then come back. So that's my brief overview it. But again, I'm not working on the Indian side of blockchain and cryptocurrency as such, so I won't be able to give any further comments as such.
Okay. We have a slightly technical question on private keys and blockchain. Do you think the loss of a private key that is allotted in blockchain is a huge disadvantage and will impact the economy if it is implemented in the future? And if the key is lost, the money is lost forever. Do you think that's a challenge?
Well, it's not a challenge, but it's okay, in the past, and I think still people are losing cryptocurrency because they have lost their private key. Just go on Google and you will see there are people who have lost billions and millions of crypto assets just because they forgot about their private key, or they locked it somewhere and that got destroyed, or something of that sort. So that keeps on happening in terms of them losing their private key, and people end up losing their crypto assets and stuff. But they are now very sophisticated and different ways of storing. You have cold wallet, you have exchange where you can store it, you can copy your private key in your pen drive, you can send an email to yourself with the private key. There are different ways depending upon how you want to keep the private key. So I don't think that's a major challenge that someone loses there, because that shouldn't be a concern of the government. That shouldn't be a concern of a third party. It's your money. If you're not being very careful with it and you lose the account details and stuff, you lose the private keys. It's not as I can do account details, but if you lose the private key, you lose it. If you have $10, you'll probably be not that serious about private key, but if 10 million, I don't think you should lose it. If you lose it, it's real stupidity. You should probably put some 100K or 200K just to safeguard your private key. So I don't think it's a problem from the governance or from the policy angle side. There are a lot of, at the beginning, there weren't enough platforms to help you store your private key, but now they are very trusted platforms, regulated platforms that will assist you in safekeeping of your private key. So that shouldn't be a challenge as such.
Yes, speaking of, there was actually a very interesting case recently where a cryptocurrency Quadriga, I believe. It's a Canadian-based cryptocurrency. The CEO, while he was actually traveling in India, he died of a disease and some complications, and no one had the access to the digital assets and cryptocurrency available. So because he died and he was the only one who knew the key, so almost $145 million of that specific crypto were lost. So that, I think that is one challenge for sure, that that's a tricky thing to manage when you're dealing with such a high level of cryptographic hashes and no one can really crack it. It does say something that these systems are immutable, but also at the same time, it's beyond recovery once it's lost.
I think over here I can give the analogy of, I think Coca-Cola or Pepsi, they have this specific trade secret and it's being written somewhere. I'm not sure whether it's actual truth or someone from the IP side, if there is an audience from intellectual property side, would probably correct me, but there is some trade secret that they have written, and it's being said that they keep it behind a safe or something. And those people who know it, they usually don't fly in the same plane. There are, I think, 2 or 3 people, and they usually don't fly in the same plane. They fly on different planes and stuff. And that's how they try to keep it safe. So if all of these people die, or a trade secret of a specific company and 3 people have shared it and all 3 people die, then obviously you lose that trade secret if it's not being kept somewhere safely. That's also a challenge for a lot of companies when their top management travel together, and because of, say, flight accidents or something, all the entire top management dies. It will be a help for that company if it's a growing company, it's a fast growing company. So I have seen that a lot of big startups here, and there is one of the startup that I was working. They usually used to go on family vacations together on the same flight. And recently there was some incident that they faced and in one of the place, and they stopped doing it. Now they book 3 different flights and separate their family members, because there are directors also in the same family, and they don't want to fly together. So they take those kind of precautions. So just like the case that Parvati pointed out, if that guy trusted someone else within the company or the family member and gave a copy of the private key, I think that would have saved a lot of money to their investors and people who trusted on them. So I don't see this losing of the private key as a challenge as such in the growth. I think it shouldn't be made a challenge. There are already actual challenges that are there. It's just that you have to use more sophisticated mechanism, and you have to come up with something more creative solutions to make sure that these kind of things don't repeat and shouldn't be a hindrance towards the development of the blockchain or the crypto assets as such.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Sandeep. I think that concludes the questions.
I'm sorry. On that note, I also recall there is a free zone here in UAE, which has a cold storage facility for storing your private key. So it's a government organization that is providing you a safe to store your private key. So there are options that are being provided so that once you lose your private key, there is someone who's guarding it. And I think government, usually people can trust government to at least store your private key. They will not just steal your private key, put it into the wallet and take your Bitcoins. That usually shouldn't happen. So there are different ways into protecting your private key. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, and I think there are a lot of other players being created because of some solutions create more problems, but those problems also give rise to innovation. So that's a very, again, important takeaway for law students, that if you don't want to work in the legal industry necessarily, you can always switch over to something else. So yes, so that concludes the questions for today. Thank you so much, Sandeep, for taking all the time and sharing your knowledge on these developments. And to the viewers, we hope you've been able to take away some useful insights from today's discussions. If you have any clarifications or anything, you can always reach out to the Digital Future, and we've also shared Sandeep's profile to you guys, so you can always look him up on LinkedIn. We will be posting, a short recap of whatever we discussed today on our website, so you can always access that there. But thank you so much. That brings the webinar to an end. You can visit us on Facebook, on Instagram, and LinkedIn, and all the details are given in the description. Thank you so much, viewers, and thank you, Sandeep.
Thank you so much, Parvati, for having me, and thanks a lot to all the participants as well. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay. Have a great evening, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.